Hasn't started yet. If you can hear me, if you can see me, it would be nice to know. Because so far, I don't think the stream has started. Or has it? Oh, here we go. Yes, I can hear myself. I think that is good. How are you guys doing on this wonderful Sunday? Hello, Thornell. How are you doing? Very good. Hey, Jeroen. How are you doing? Oh, and hello, Mike. How are you doing? Well, since my voice is kind of shut, I guess I need to lubricate my throat. Cheers, everybody. Yeah, I don't know what led me to believe that scheduling a live stream for the day I come back from a festival was a good idea, but here we are. We'll see how long I'll manage to do this before I just collapse. Nice. I hope you had fun at the expo. Anyway, so yeah, I as I mentioned, I was at a festival. It's called Iron Fest. It is interesting because it is in wine country, which is normally not the German thing. So instead of beer, most people there are drinking wine, Riesling in particular, because that's sort of like the region. And it's right next to Ramstein Air Base, which was very busy on Friday, Thursday. Definitely on Thursday, like lots of planes coming in and out, and I assume nothing bad going on there. That the U.S. Air Force needs to fly in like a plane every 20 minutes, or so I hope. Well, in that case, happy birthday. Also, pizza sounds really good. Oh, also, hello, Ida. Yeah, Jeroen, I know I mean, I haven't been part of the Fireside Discord for a while, so I don't know what's going on there. But I know that Britain is usually doing some Sunday evening streams, but beyond that, I don't know anyone who's doing regular streams. And I mean, I usually try to do my monthly stream on a Saturday, but since we're right now in the heavy metal festival season, lots of Saturdays are, occupied by mostly dudes making loud noise. And by making loud noise, I mean not me talking into a microphone. Yes, Britain does the social club. It usually starts a bit later, which may or may not be part of the issue because I know Matt usually starts at 8 as well. And yeah, so anyway, uh, that's what I did the last couple of days was sleeping in a tent on the ground and drinking wine as a civilized person that I am. True. Don't question that one. I suspect I will not be invited to Critical Drinkers pub anytime soon. And even if I was, I would not actually show up because fuck that guy. So that's kind of the point. Is like I did manage to upload one video while at the festival, and yeah, I think some people watched it and some people liked it, and yeah, I felt the need to say something about the whole like books for men kind of thing because that kind of discourse is rubbing me the wrong way. But it's been like a very you know, rough week. Um, Good question, Ori. I don't know. I certainly didn't use a chemical one because the festival venue is next to a, well, lake, like a small lake where you can, drive boats around and stuff like that. And they do have like an actual, water using toilet facility there. So, almost civilized. But yeah, there were definitely chemical toilets on the campground, of course, but I managed to avoid them. Yeah, books for 2.5 men, possibly. No, I don't know. It's just like something that has always frustrated me. And when I came back from Rock Hard Festival on like Monday last week, and found like several videos talking about the subject, I was like, nah, man, fuck this shit. But that leaves the question of like what I will do next and what I will read next, because very little reading happening over the last couple of days, what with the whole festival thing and so forth. And I assume there's a couple of the books I really should get to that I have somehow missed, and I don't know why. Um, but I'm pretty sure that if I would look on that list that I wrote at some point where I put all the books, new publication dates and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that I will find stuff that I forgot to, get to. That is unfortunately true, Ori. It is very much a fascist kind of discourse, and it's you know, as if we can't just read whatever the fuck we want and have always been able to, because that's like the other thing that I didn't get to, like, because I talked about it in like a video like last year, I think already. Like the idea that we need books for men implies that there aren't enough books published that men can just go and read, which is just wrong. But it's this sort of weird um feeling of aggrievement and so forth that has become so prevalent whenever mostly white dudes complain that there aren't enough epic fantasy books because everyone is reading those pesky romanticities or whatever, and it's kind of stupid. Hey Chad, yeah, how you doing? Nice, cool that you have a gecko now. I assume you've had reptiles before, so this is not the first gecko that you got. Sublimation. No, I didn't have that one on my list. I'm pretty sure, but I'll check it out. Obviously, even I Wizard had Atlas Shrugged on his list, so I think the arbiters of masculinity have spoken, and yes, women can write books for men if they include enough glorification of rape. There are surprisingly many men in Left Hand of Darkness. That is true. Exactly. Somehow I knew it would be the Vampire Lestat, Thornall. I think you have mentioned this one in the past. But, I hope that discourse will die down again and people will find something else to complain about or talk about. And I mean, the booktube drama mill will continue to spin and something will come up and someone will be mad about something. And then everyone still has to talk about an R.F. Kuang book that is only coming out in like 5 months and no one has read. And, I'm sure people will be busy. I just hope that I'll be able to actually get more stuff done this week, read more, kind of, calm down a little after like 2 festivals on 2 weekends. like one after the other, that is physically exhausting, because like the last one was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, returning on Monday, leaving on Thursday morning, and yeah, now coming back. That is absolutely true. Oh, right. I had that John Harrison thing on my list. Good that you reminded me, because otherwise I would have probably forgotten. No, but like that's like the other thing that I don't understand, or well, maybe not don't understand, but like I find so troubling, because it's like, well, you read these books to become more masculine, so these books need to reflect whatever we think makes you masculine, and yeah, it's quite telling what kind of books people are picking as books for men, which is usually some fucking Marcus Aurelius, because obviously Marcus Aurelius is clearly the role model that we all need to follow, and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that the that Marcus Aurelius isn't interesting to read as a historical source, but it's maybe not the thing we need to understand the 21st century. And then it's usually at least one Cormac McCarthy, and right. Yeah, I mean, I do really enjoy Cormac McCarthy books. Don't get me wrong, but like once again, is that the type of masculinity we're aspiring to? I don't know. And the other part, however, is of course that the sort of like equivalent discourse for books for women is more about women should not read these books because they will make them into worse women, because all of that pornography and all of those romanticities and stuff like that. And I mean, come on, guys! Like, I thought we had moved on from that kind of gender discourse, but apparently we haven't. Oh, right, the Jeff Noon one I saw as well. That might be interesting as well. I mean, I did really enjoy the thing he did with Beard, the Gog Magog and Lut Luda books. Those were really fun. Um, I'm not even going to look into that whole Skittles discourse. Hey, hey, Max Garfield. Now, me getting rest, I somehow feel that is not going to happen anytime soon. Yes, Chadia, that's kind of the point. You're supposed to hate all of those fuckers because they are evil men doing evil shit. Because that's just, how genociding your way through the American Southwest, makes you, turns you into. And yeah, that's the point. It's like they're not supposed to be likable characters, and it's totally fine to go like, well, maybe read something else. Karl May is probably has always been very sort of like I think the books have always been very much like marketed towards boys, I guess. And I mean, he explicitly published some of his stories like in a magazine for young boys. So yeah, clearly Karl May for sure. Although I think once they made the movies in the 70s, it became very much sort of like an all gender kind of thing. I will not comment on the Sven Hassel thing. But yeah, apparently books for men are Marcus Aurelius and Cormac McCarthy and apparently Ayn Rand, which, what can you do? People do be stupid. I had the title and then I forgot it, Chadia, but I'll check it and I'll let you know. Yeah, I mean, like Karl May books aren't explicitly, targeted towards men in like, you don't have to be a guy to like Winnetou, right? That's totally fine to not be that. But it's one of those things where like I feel like with children's books in a lot of ways, literature for children has often been more explicitly gendered, because that's sort of like where we need to sort of like instill gender roles and stuff into people. And in that regard, a lot of like children's books, there's like all of these like magazines for young boys, or used to be magazines for young boys, books for young boys, magazines for young girls, books for young girls, stuff like that. you know Girls get all the horse books, and dudes get, I don't know what boys get. I guess I guess Karl May, which is also kind of a book about horses, but also guns. Ayn Rand is definitely an honorary manly man. So here's the thing. I understand why 15-year-old boys like Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. The problem is that people in their 40s still think that Ayn Rand is a good writer, which she is not and has never been. And you know, the, Ayn Rand should be a phase that you grow out of relatively quickly. Yeah, Moon over Brendel, right? That's the one. It sounded like a weird sort of semi-autobiographical novel about a boy meeting an aging science fiction author, and then there's also like weird stuff happening around that. So who knows? I am certainly intrigued. I have not read any Sarah J. Maas, so I will not comment on the liking or disliking of Akatar. I mean, I assume they're fine-ish. Hey, the Gistal has arrived. How are you doing, my friend? Where in France are you now? I assume you're still in France, which I think was like 2 weeks ago when we talked for a moment. Hey, and Bedivere, nice to see you. How you doing? No, Ada Palmer is really good. I still need to read her history book from last year, like the Renaissance one. And I assume at some point the new Viking book will come out that she was writing. Who knows? Yeah, I can see that, Thornell. Ekatar does sound like the Dark Lord from some 80s fantasy novel or like an early video game. So if reading Ada Palmer makes the Demidrach a good man, does that mean that Ada Palmer's the Terra Ignota is a manly series for men? Um, well, I hope things continue to go good for you there in this France of yours over there. Um, I don't think you give me much to rant about. So we'll see. I'll listen to it whenever Britain puts it out. I mean, I think he has like a couple of weeks lead time with that regard, because like some people are actually good at scheduling like stuff, unlike me. Terra Ignota is mostly also not concerned about the gender of its characters, which is kind of the point, right? In a lot of ways. So yeah, excellent series though. I read, let me think. I read Terra Ignota last year in January, I think, like January 2025. Sounds about right. Could have been more, probably that time. I would have to double check, but I really enjoyed it. It's the kind of book that felt specifically written for me and my obscure interests, because like a lot of the sort of like deism stuff that Palmer puts in is stuff that I have, you know, read for that PhD thesis of mine that never got finished. So when she's, mentioning Charles Blunt, I'm like, I'm probably one of the few people who actually know who that guy is, because I've read a lot of books about, philosophy of religion in the 17th and 18th century. And yeah, interesting stuff. Like the whole thing about like the Freemasons and stuff. I know, like I'm sure I've read some of the books that Palmer used as like a main inspiration for some of that stuff. So yeah, I should probably go back and reread them and actually make videos about them, which I didn't do at the time. Well, I mean, like gender is a spectrum anyway, so of course, everyone is a bit of everything, I guess. Yes, that's France, the place where where Germans go when they get angry, I guess. Every century. I have not read a Confederacy of Dunces, but always time. I don't know. I don't know if hunting for crypto fascists is sort of like the main thing I want to do with my life. Also, I mean, we live in a world where there's enough outright fascists out in the open that you know they keep me busy enough. Yeah, I know that. I mean, I know that some trans readers have issues with Terra Ignota and the whole like gender thing that Palmer does there. I personally found it interesting and well done, but gender is not sort of like my main thing in general. So I don't have to think about it. It's a privilege at the end of the day that I am very confident in my specific form of masculinity, I guess, or you know I mean, that's like the other thing that so much of this whole like books for men and being a guy or whatever is like boils down to how you define masculinity and whether that's stuff that you like or don't like. I personally really enjoy setting shit on fire and being obnoxious in the open and publicly consuming alcohol. Turns out those are things that are seen as somewhat masculine, so I guess I'm happy there. But I have lots of friends who are women who also enjoy setting shit on fire and drinking beer in public. You know, are they very masculine in that moment? I don't know. I don't, frankly, I don't care. But like, I think it's important to understand that, or keep in mind that a lot of this comes down to whether the things we like are seen as sort of like congruent with how the world expects us to behave according to whatever gender they ascribe to us at the end of the day. Well, I mean, that is definitely a list of the all-time greats, there. Yes, that's one, like, the gender thing I feel is just, because of, culture war bullshit that people sort of, like, fixate on the gender thing when there's, like, all these other elements that are just, like, really interesting and fascinating and so forth. I do still believe that terra ignota in a very real sense is, Ada Palmer sort of writing a reply, or not a reply, but like some form of response or counter argument to Dan Simmons, and especially with the whole like Iliad and Odyssey stuff happening in the later books. Where I'm like, yeah, this is clearly someone who did not like Ilium and Olympus by Dan Simmons. But I don't know if Palmer has actually publicly spoken about that. So I'm just assuming stuff here because I can. I have not read the West Passage, but I have wanted to for the longest time. That's the one that some people have compared to Gormenghast, right? Does that make sense for you, Drew? Um, did you enjoy it, Chadia? I said, like, I'm definitely still sort of like it's one of those things that I want to read at some point, and it's got a new book coming out, and apparently Glenn Cook liked it, and that's always a good reason to read a book. Yeah, but that's kind of the point, right? There's so many books coming out that it's easy to lose track. I mean, there's a new Premier Mohammed coming later this year. There's a new Chuck Tingle coming relatively soon. There's a new Silvia Moreno Garcia coming later this year. There's so much stuff, and yeah, I hope I get back to reading more stuff than I did the last couple of weeks, so I can make videos about actual books and not just about stuff. Well, that's something. I mean, the characters in Gormenghast are certainly something, to put it mildly. But maybe a good thing that it is not trying too hard to be too Gormenghasty. Yeah, man, it's been super fucking hot here as well. And while all of Germany seems to have gotten like lots of heavy rainfall and thunderstorms, that one part of the Palatinate that I was at did not get any of that. So that was still very hot, and it's super fucking hot here as well, like around the 30-ish degree mark, which, as I try to figure out, seems to be around 86 freedom units. Uh, I forgot the Silvio Moreno Garcia one was about, I don't know, but I'm going to read it nevertheless. Nice. I guess I'll have to listen to that then because, I like Gene Wolfe. I like Premier Mohammed. I think that's a good combination. Um, I mean, I guess historically, the Adams family would be Gormenghast for Americans. I I highly recommend you read Gormenghast. It is weird in a very unique way, and I really appreciated that. However, I would recommend not reading it while being sick with mild fever. It does add to the surrealism and weirdness, but maybe not in the best of ways. Ooh, both the long and the short sun are fun. No, you can't compare the Adams Family and Gormenghast. There's still a good chance that Gormenghast isn't for you, though. Like it certainly is a very weird book in a lot of ways, and there's lots of ways for people to not like Gormenghast. I usually recommend getting there's an illustrated edition because Mervyn Peake was an artist in a lot of ways outside of being a writer, and made his own illustrations for Gormenghast, and you can get like the whole like trilogy ish thing with all of like Peake's own illustrations if you want to really get the weirdness. Well, I'm glad you finally found out about Gormenghast. I hope you really enjoy it because it is really fucking cool and weird and depressing and weird. But yeah, it's been a while since I last read Gormenghast. Maybe I should reread that because all I remember now is people wanting to be owls and stuff like that. I mean, that's like the other thing about Gormenghast. In a lot of ways, it is a very, very, very British kind of book. Or it says a lot about Britain in general. Well, Britain, the country, and not not some oaky dude. Anyway, yeah, that's fun to know. Thank you, Ori. I do very much appreciate that one. A gothic Middlemarch sounds, yeah. It's, I don't know if I would call it fun, but it is weird in this sort of like surrealist way, and where everything is sort of slightly distorted and strange and stuff. And yeah, also the upper class is so caught up with themselves and their weirdness that they don't notice how young Steerpike takes over the entire place, and you know Titus Groan just lives on the side there. Yeah, thank you, Thornell, for that one. And you're absolutely correct there. That is exactly what Alaric did. So I guess what we need to do is blame Alaric for some of the worst tendencies in Christianity. Like, without the sacking of Rome, we wouldn't get the divine city, and what a loss that would be. Well, that's like something I was thinking about. Is like if I should maybe actually talk about history stuff a bit more in videos, because having the academic background and at least in parts and so forth means that there might be interesting bits and pieces to talk about. Including the fascinating fact that during some time in the 18th century, Paris brothels had a special rate for priests to just touch women's breasts because they're not allowed to do anything. But apparently, the demand was large enough to actually have a special rate for that. One of those facts you that are easy to hard to forget, and yeah. Well, I mean, blaming goths has always been fun, so I'm fine with that. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that, Thornall. But it's it's interesting to find these kind of things. I mean, that's just why I personally think that the genre or the specific style of microhistory is one of those things that make for really good reading, even for people that are not necessarily studying history or anything of the sorts, because you pick like one weird small detail and you just focus on that one interesting moment in time. You don't explain like any grander picture, but you're like, hey, there's this weird Italian miller who wrote a book about how life could have maybe evolved in ways that are different from God just doing the God thing. And then you get the worms, the worms and the cheese. Cheese and the worms, whichever way around it is in English. I think they are bitten by other monks. That's how that works. I'm, is that a quote from the Devils, or is this something that you just made up yourself, Thornall? Because it sounds like it could be from last year's Abercrombie. Um, but maybe it's also just me being really tired and brain foggy today. Um, that's a good question. I thought, did Abercrombie announce the second volume for the Devils, or do I just imagine that? Because I think I've read something somewhere, and then I probably forgot again. I think you're pretty smart, nevertheless. But yeah, it did sound like the Devils. I mean, up to a point, the werewolf character is probably the most interesting thing in the Devils. Although there's also that the fact that apparently Abercrombie always has to write a character that from time to time switches personality and becomes a murdering monstrosity. And I mean, he's good at it, but also I don't know. Oh, right, the heretics, the devils, the heretics. I wonder what the third one will be. Yeah, the necromancer's fun too. I'll probably read it. I mean, I didn't enjoy the devils that much, but Abercrombie is still a pretty good writer, and I have this problem where I find it really hard to start a series and then actually finish it. The same way that I can't actually DNF books. I've never done that. It's like I start a book, I need to finish that book. And I feel like the only time I have started a series technically and have not finished it, beyond obviously, the Drizzt books, was Wizard's First Rule, which I did finish, but I did not continue with whatever the second book in Sword of Truth is. That is unfortunately true. You cannot finish Drizzt. Drizzt will finish you. And yeah, Audible is, it's the general subscription model kind of thing, I guess. I mean, you can always go to libro.fm where you can just like buy stuff or get a subscription and get like 1 credit per month and then buy stuff. And Libro being, generally the better option because you get like actually DRM free audiobooks in whatever format you want. You don't have to do any of these other things. They are tied to bookstore.com. So whenever you buy an audiobook, a small percentage of whatever is donated, paid to a brick and mortar bookstore of your choosing. And isn't that nice? Yeah, well, the Addams Family part, yeah, I guess that's bad. No, oh, talking about audiobooks, stuff is getting really interesting. I found that there is an unabridged audiobook of the Unabomber's manifesto and the other writings of Theodore Kaczynski. And I love the fact that they spell the name Theodore Kaczynski full and don't go for Ted Kaczynski. But yeah, apparently audiobook of Ted Kaczynski's writings does exist. I'm not sure who owns those materials and who's actually collecting the royalties on that stuff. So yeah, that was interesting. Also, apparently, that one audiobook company that I get a lot of audiobooks from for reasons has decided that next to Mao's Handbook for Guerrilla Warfare, the one thing we truly need is an unabridged audiobook of Muammar Gaddafi's Green Book. So maybe I'll read that. Maybe I'll review that. If right wing edge lord edge lady, I guess, if booktubers can make videos about the camp of the Saints, I'm pretty sure that making a book review of Gaddafi's Green Book is a good idea. I mean, yeah, that's the point. It's like everyone knows him as Ted Kaczynski, right? And it's like, I mean, technically, I guess Theodore was the correct name, but come on. I understand why he went with Ted, and yeah, but yeah, I was just like wondering, technically his copyright, obviously he's dead now, but like who's getting the money from this? Is it all rights reserved the estate of Theodore Kaczynski? I don't know. Um, I guess I'll have to listen to the whole thing to find out because I'm sure it'll have a copyright notice at some point. Gaddafi was a bad dictator because all dictators are bad. However, in he was more on the Joker side of things compared to some other like comic book villains, I guess. Um, so who's to say? No, definitely a bad guy. But he also wrote the sci-fi story. Like apparently, Gaddafi wrote sci-fi short stories in his youth. Um, the same way that Saddam Hussein wrote romance novels, which you know. But that's like the thing when it comes to like authoritarian rulers. I guess Gaddafi did certainly last relatively long. I still think that it's either Salazar in Portugal, or maybe Franco, or Tito. I guess Tito is probably the 20th century dictator that I think was the best at actually ruling a country and stuff. But yeah, you're right, Bedivere. They're a weird bunch in all kinds of ways. Uh, which I guess is partly one of the reasons why Behind the Bastards is such a successful podcast at this point, because you learn weird shit about dictators, and all kinds of other terrible people. But certainly a lot of dictators in that list, and yeah, what a weird bunch indeed. Maybe it kind of comes with the job. But yeah, I would still love to read Saddam Hussein's romance novels, but I don't think you can get them easily at the moment. Also, once again, like who gets who gets the royalties from sales of Saddam Hussein's romance novels? The nation state of Iraq, maybe. Oh, oh, Thornhill. That was brutal. Anyway, um, I was going to say something about Maggie Thatcher and something Warhammer, and then I forgot. Well, I've never watched The Apprentice, so I guess I'm good with that. But yeah, uh, most things beat watching The Apprentice, I assume. But I mean, back at that point, Trump was at least somewhat funny in a weird way, and we have certainly left that part behind. Except, of course, when he called the Pope weak on crime and nuclear weapons, and I'm like, well, clearly, the key competence of the Pope has to be nuclear weapons and foreign policy. Um, I I think they. I mean, there's stuff in like the Enemy Within campaign for Warhammer Fantasy that is pretty heavily sort of like inspired by the coal miner strikes and Maggie Thatcher and stuff like that. And there's orcs having a battle flag that is just a portrait of Maggie Thatcher and stuff like that. It's all over the place. But it is the good old days of Warhammer. Yeah. Politicians definitely giving a bad name, a bad reputation to Nosferatu's everywhere at this point. But what can you do? Uh, watch the world burn, I guess. I mean, even in Germany right now, where everyone is just like wondering what the fuck is going on and why are like I I don't like conservative politicians, but why can't they at least be somewhat competent? Why do they have to be both stupid, wrong, and inept? Right? There's like, not that I want good fascists like competent fascists, but still, it's like I thought your one job was to make capitalism work, and you can't even do that one. Yeah, that's what it's like. Of course, I'm pretty sure that Bobby from Chicago is can be one mean one mean motherfucker in any fight, especially with the Donnie from Queens versus Bobby from Chicago. I don't know. Sorry, I can feel my voice go, so I have to drink some more, I guess. But then the last band that played at the festival yesterday was Tankard from very close to where I live. A band that has made an entire career about singing about beer. That is unfortunately also true, Bedivere. It is kind of the point. It's like you need. I mean, that's like part of the interesting thing that I wish more people would be aware of. That Sven Beckett certainly made a point of emphasizing in his capitalism a global history from last year is like capitalism only works, free markets only work because there's state power with the threat of violence guaranteeing that that shit works, because otherwise you know free markets don't automatically spontaneously create themselves. Uh, yeah, they need to be created, and they need to be enforced vigorously. I think it's David Graeber said that in possibly the Utopia of Rules. It's like whenever you hear someone talk about the free market, look for the guy with the gun, and he was right in more than one way, I guess. Yeah, FDR definitely existed. Really good book recommendation is it called Machine Made? I'll double check that one. That looks at Tammany Hall and how sort of like Tammany Hall was key in creating a lot of the sort of like more social policies that first Al Smith did in New York State, and then that ended up being part of FDR's administration. And like a lot of the people that FDR brought with him were people that obviously had Tammany Hall connections because New York politics and so forth. But sort of like the message there is that there is an interesting sort of like connection between 19th century organized crime as up to a point organized crime as sort of like the supporting sort of structure for first obviously for immigrants, because they didn't have like the the United States have never been very friendly to immigrants, especially immigrants that have not that were not deemed to be white enough or whatever. So building organized crime filled a lot of like these social needs in a lot of ways, and how that then translated into labor policies and some levels of workplace security itself, workplace safety and stuff like that. Yeah, I got up the cable. Thanks, Jeroen. I hope this is better. This is all a bit precarious at the moment, the setup here. Glad to have you back, Mike. I hope the camera thing is fixed now. Sorry for the switch up there. But yeah, that machine-made book, highly recommend it. It may not all be 100%, the final truth, but because we're talking history, there is no such thing as a final truth. But it's certainly an interesting perspective that is a nice companion piece to stuff like The Power Broker by Robert Caro, which you obviously should read if you have, the patience to go through like 1,200 pages of here's why New York sucks now. Perfect. Thanks, Chadia. And yeah, thanks for letting me know about the camera. And sorry it took a while to realize that because I'm not constantly reading the chat at the same time because makes it hard to focus if I'm listening to screen reader tell me chat things. And as we all know, I have to be incredibly focused to send out all of these wonderful words of wisdom. Oh, yeah, give me a second. I'll check. I think it's machine made. Now that I'm recommending books, I should probably at least check the names. But that I remember why I read that book. I think it was when I had this idea of writing a fantasy story about the United Service Magicians. And I figured a union of service magicians would fit really well into like late 19th century New York. And then I never wrote that story because I'm bad at writing stuff. Yes, by Terry Galway, Machine-Made Tammany Hall and the Creation of Modern American Politics. Highly recommend that book. Yeah, Robert Caro is fascinating to listen to in interviews, and I think we talked about that on like one of Britain's streams. He's got the thickest New York accent I've ever experienced, and he's so much fun to listen to. Brilliant writer, definitely, and I still need to go through his LBJ series. Like the man writes like one book every 20 years or so, and each of them is a massive doorstopper, and they're really worthwhile. But yeah, the interviews he did with the 99% Invisible guys for the Power Broker for that year when they read the Power Broker there were really funny to listen to, really entertaining. And like all of the other stuff they did around that book was also amazing. But the interview with Robert Caro, the interviews were just like so much fun. So yeah, check out Robert Caro, probably one of the best nonfiction books ever written, even won a Pulitzer. All about one guy building way too many highways and bridges and stuff. So definitely recommend reading The Power Broker. And, as I said, Tammany Machine Made. There's so much stuff that I find so fascinating when it comes to like US history in particular, where you're like, there's so much stuff that happened in the US that has been so completely sort of like erased from a lot of people's sort of like memory. And, obviously you go into more like leftist circles or whatever, and everyone knows about how Robert Moses fucked over New York and stuff because of that one book that Robert Caro wrote. But like outside of like specific leftist circles, like how many people know about the Battle of Blair Mountain that aren't already converted to the cause of being an anti-capitalist? And if you don't know about the Battle of Blair Mountain, you might want to check that one out in general. It's one of it was the first time that the United States military actually bombed places in the US because a bunch of mine workers had a bit of a misunderstanding or an argument with mine owners, and it all spiraled out of control completely. And yeah, you had like a 3 day war waged in in fucking West Virginia in the 1920s. And the general history of like mine worker striking, or like labor history in general, in the US, is one of those things where I wish more people would know about it, because it shows that narrative of like America, the United States being sort of like this place where everyone is always being like an entrepreneur and self-made millionaire, whatever, is wrong. And like so much of it was hard fought stuff that lots of union work and stuff like that did help there. Kim Kelly's Fight Like Hell is a really good book on that whole like labor struggle thing. Hey Britton, how you doing? But yeah, like if you want to know more about like the history of like labor struggles in the US, Kim Kelly's Fight Like Hell is a good choice. For the whole like West Virginia coal mining battles in the 1910s and 1920s and so forth. I did read what's it called? Devil is in These Hills or something like that, which is all about West Virginia coal mining. And you know that time when the mine owners hired the Pinkertons, who took a train and armed took a train with machine guns and just gunned down a bunch of mine working families while driving through the mine camp on the train and shooting people, because we can't have actual collective bargaining or anything of the sorts. Yeah, I think you're right there, Bedivere, that it is like both like America, the US is really large and there's so many different things going on. Um, I just always find it fascinating that like how few people actually, outside of already dedicated sort of like left ish the people, know about stuff like the IWW, like the Wobblies and Eugene Debs, and the way that the US worked, well, imprisoned basically all of the union people, because they thought that maybe World War I is a bad idea and going to war is not the best thing to do, and so they just imprisoned everyone. And I think I always find it just so fascinating to, when you read like actual history books about that kind of stuff, like how huge all of this was. Like the fact that like the United States had a very, very, very active, large labor movement in the 1910s and 1920s, and then it kind of went nowhere. The Pinkertons are one of those really fascinating agencies, because they're still around. You can still the Pinkerton Detective Agency still exists, and they have a career of just like an entire history of just committing crimes and murdering people in the name of capital. And yet, when you play the Deadlands pen and paper role playing game, the Pinkertons are the good guys hunting down monsters. In the first edition, the second edition, that is no longer the case because the Pinkerton Detective Agency sued uh, Pinnacle Entertainment in the 90s because they didn't want to be, represented in a weird spaghetti western horror tabletop role playing game. Hey Kale, how you doing? How is Monday? I think they just call it the agency now in the later editions. But yeah, as I like the Pinkertons, definitely the kind of group that did break a lot of strikes by just straight up murdering people with lots of guns. I think it's like the Pullman strike in the like 1890s where they actually had to retreat after a while because after like shooting at strikers for several days, they lost a bunch of people in that situation. Yeah, waking up too early can happen. But then again, you're in Australia. Isn't it slowly becoming winter-ish for you? Shouldn't it be less fucked up or like temperature-wise, or are you still in the broiling side of things? That is definitely too early. 5:11 a.m. is too early. So yeah, welcome to me talking about how how American workers have been systematically murdered and violated by people throughout the last centuries. Not just in the U.S., of course, but with the U.S., it feels so fascinating, and it's part of to bring it back to novels, right? It's a lot of the opening parts of Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon are all about that with the what's his name, Travers, the father of the Traverses, being a anarchist miner who dynamites uh, mine owners and then having to flee. Yeah, that might be apocryphal. I don't know about that, but yeah. And and that's like the important thing to remember about all of this before we, I don't know, move on to something else. Is like a lot of these like labor struggles were definitely violence and definitely physical, but without those kind of things, a lot of the stuff that we take for granted when it comes to workplace safety, uh, sick leave, the concept of sick leave, stuff like that, all of these things only exist because people did go out and actually fought for this shit, like physically fought for this shit. They did not just like magically appear or anything of the sorts. And the fact that we don't have like strong union systems, strong unions in a lot of countries these days, a lot of this stuff is still very much, makes it so much easier to dismantle social safety nets, social security, and all of these things, and make life far worse for everyone involved. Yeah, cold. I mean, I know there's a couple of places that could get snow in Australia, but it's not very many, right? The Free People's Village. I'll have to keep an eye on that one because it does sound interesting. See, that's one of the fascinating things that where I was like, you can tell if a book is really new when I read Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor. There are mechanical birds that need, that are surveillance drones to so technically study the like other bird populations and bird movements and stuff like that. And they show up a couple of times. And I was like, is this something that only exists because birds are not real? Uh, Made such a big deal, and that's where people started thinking about that kind of stuff, or what happened there, right? And I find this interesting when you read books that are clearly sort of like a post-COVID kind of sort of like product where you can see how the world has changed the same way that say 9/11 changed how people were writing books, and you read books that are post 9/11 after you can tell in a lot of ways, and I think we are slowly seeing sort of like this shift emerge in post-COVID pandemic books. Which was one of the fascinating parts of Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson, because it's one of those small details on the side that doesn't really have like anything larger going on. It's just a thing that also is mentioned on the side. It's like how, in that world, there's COVID-19 and there's COVID-26 and so forth, because we'll get more of these kind of pandemics, and the way that stuff is handled is basically by once again contact tracing and stuff like that, but having that ad just like on an app on your phone where you can see how many people you've recently interacted with that may or may not have had exposure to the current sort of like virulent version of like a virus. There is no bird. But yeah, I just found that interesting because Termination Shock is from 22, I guess, maybe. So, Neil Stephenson sometimes being really good at extrapolating specific technologies, but also oftentimes spectacularly wrong. Or he just makes up something that sounds really cool, and then people go like, "Well, I guess we'll pour down another 80 billion to create the metaverse that doesn't exist." And it's definitely not just like a video game. Well, but yeah, the Raynela book definitely felt sort of like post-COVID. The same way that We Dance Upon Demons by Vaishnavi Patel felt very aware. I mean, obviously, it's set in the now and the here and now, and thus has to talk about the pandemic as something that happened and that fucked up a lot of. Anyway, yeah, but I mean, I've spoken about this in the past. Like, read read that book, read We Dance Upon Demon. Then I don't know, do the things that Patel suggests you should do in the author's afterword, which is don't abortion clinic. They need that. The thing with Elon is, and that's something that Jonathan Carroll talks about in White Fragility, not White Fragility, Speculative Whiteness. Because Elon Musk is so ideologically sort of like driven, he does read every book through that specific lens. Like the man is claims to be a huge fan of the culture novels by Ian M. Banks, who was a member of of the Scottish Socialist Party, right? Like we're not like the post-scarcity culture universe is very anarchist and very anti-capitalist. But Banks goes out of his way to even state that having money is a sign of a of an underdeveloped society. That and Elon Musk claims that these are his favorite novels, and he wants to bring that future into fruition. And I don't think he has read the same books in that regard. By which I mean I don't think he's capable of reading them other than cool white men make cool machine go cool stuff, and also me make money, and and that's not what's in those books. It's the same way that David Duke, no, not David Duke, Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer is a huge fan of the Dune novels, apparently, and I don't think those books say what he claims they say, and yeah. Well, uh, I don't know if if God Emperor Elon is a good thing to do. No, but yeah. So yeah, the speculative whiteness, science fiction and the alt right is definitely a book that I highly recommend. It even won a Hugo for best nonfiction last year. Also, I need to read that book by Alex E. Harrow, the Everlasting, because it just won a Hugo Locus, and it's the one book on that list, one of the few books on that list that I haven't read because I've read the winner for best sci-fi novel, which is definitely authored by Nnedi Okorafor, which you should read. It's good, and is Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, and I read that. That was really good, and there were a bunch of others that I've also read that were also all really good. That won prizes, won awards. No, Trump. Neither Trump nor Elon are particularly deep thinkers. Um, Chadia, I personally would recommend reading them in publication order and just start with Consider Fleabus. A lot of people don't like that book that much. It's definitely a very gross one. It has some really weird shit going on. If you have issues with cannibalism and stuff, uh, maybe not the best way to start. But if you find with like the grotesqueness and the body horror and stuff, Consider Fleabus is a pretty cool book. Um, Otherwise, the second one is The Player of Games. That one a lot of people really enjoy, and I think it has sort of like the main things that Banks does, sort of like more polished in a lot of ways. I think the conversations with drones that are sort of like one of the key things, and like the artificial intelligences in general interacting with humans. That stuff is in there more. The plot is less episodic than Consider Fleabus and so forth. So I guess that. Um, the thing is, they're called the Culture series. They're all novels set in the culture, but they don't connect. There's a couple of novels where some characters sort of like overlap, but all of them are standalone, and so forth. See, there's a difference between Baker and Banks, though, because Baker Baker tries to uh, Baker takes himself too seriously, I think. It's the edgelord part there. When when Banks does the weird, grotesque uh, cannibalism weirdness shit in Consider Fleabus, that stuff's played for laughs. That's supposed to be funny in its over the top crudeness in a lot of ways. So that's a really important element there. Banks, Banks being Scottish and Baker being Canadian, I think makes a lot of does a lot of stuff there. Yeah, it's hard. I don't think you would call it hard sci-fi. It's more like space opera in that regard. I mean, those are weird categories, but it's so far in the future that he doesn't go into maths or anything of the sort unless it becomes really important for one specific scene. But he doesn't talk about like how technology works because all of that stuff is so far beyond human our understanding right now. It's basically magic, but with computers and stuff. And you have these minds. The artificial intelligences are just called minds, and they basically run society because they're so much smarter than humans, uh, and do weird AI shit. And you have all the other weird, ultra far future sort of things. There's certainly a connection to Star Trek there. It's closer to Star Trek in that regard than to Star Wars. But I wouldn't call it hard sci-fi. It's definitely closer to literary fiction than it is to a lot of like genre fiction in, well, not genre fiction, to a lot of like hard sci-fi stuff. But then again, Ian Banks was already a published literary fiction author before he decided to put the M in when he publishes sci-fi novels. Um, but it can be really, really funny to read. A lot of stuff is really funny. A lot of stuff is also just generally fascinating, cool things. Um, I I did enjoy the the sort of like structural twist thing that he does in use of weapons, where he has basically two. And it's something that partly um, Fonda Lee does with Last Contract of Isako, where you get like one story and then you get like the other story part in like a different time. But what happens in use of weapons is that you have like two timelines, and the chapters are alternating, so they cross over in the middle of the book. So you have like book Roman numerals 1 to 10 and Arabic numerals 1 to 10, and one of them moves backwards in time, going further and further into the past, and one moves forwards in time, and then they cross over at some point, which is just like really, really neat. But yeah, consider Fleabus is fun if consider Fleabus also does something really interesting in that the main characters are all bad guys in one way or another, and the main guy is actually working against the culture and trying to destroy the culture. And Banks does deal a lot with this question that Nick Bostrom then also fucked around with and obviously failed, which is like, if we have machines that can do everything, so what do we as humans do? How do we find meaning in a post-scarcity, fully automated luxury space communism kind of world, right? Like, what do you do to find meaning? And Banks wrestles with this a lot in all of his novels, and I think he comes up with interesting answers. On the other hand, Nick Bostrom in his Deep Utopia is just like, well, I guess we're kind of fucked. We need to find meaning somewhere, and then he goes, well, if if artificial intelligence can create drugs that make us buff immediately, why would anyone ever go to the gym to work out? And I'm like, this is something only someone who has never actually tried any kind of sports can write, because the goal is, I mean, you know, I don't know that. Then he goes like, well, the other thing is like shopping is something that gives people meaning. But if an AI, if artificial intelligence can just create the perfect outfit and my perfect living room or house decoration and everything, it's like, why would I ever go shopping again? It's like, well, because we're doing these things because they're fun, not because it's the most efficient way of getting stuff done. I mean, people who enjoy shopping do that because it's fun, not because they want to most efficiently acquire stuff, right? That and that completely just passes that guy by, and he's the author that all the AI motherfuckers read and assume that his understanding of artificial intelligence is where the future goes. And he still talks about computers and robots and stuff will take over all jobs, so we need to redistribute wealth. And like, but like, if we have solved all of these wonderful problems, why would we still need fucking money and capitalism? Why would you still need to redistribute wealth if basically machines can provide all our food and all our stuff? So why would we still need capitalism at that point? You know what I mean? And that's the step that those motherfuckers never takes. Like, well, guys, we don't need capitalism if your AI future will come, which it won't. But in that situation where all problems are solved. We don't need money to sort of like negotiate how to allocate resources in a in a scarce market. We don't have a market at that point, but what can you do? It's not like CEOs of tech companies are paid to be smart. So yeah, here's my rant about current AI bullshit. It's just something I still need to finish that fucking video so I can move on to the next thing, which will be Mormonism, because I've had it with all of this Mormon stuff. And now that no one is talking about Brandon Sanderson, I figured it's time for me to make videos about him, because now's now's the best way to not make those videos become successful. Yeah, that's the point, Bedivere. That's exactly the point. He goes like, "Well, this is exactly what will happen, and now we need to find ways to still be human." So, but the idea, the fucking idea to go, well, no one, people find meaning in working out. So if machines can make us look sexy without going to work out, where will we find meaning? And I'm like, well, because we go to the gym to work, because it gives us meaning to, slowly do stuff, improve at stuff. It gives us the illusion of control, which is, why there is such overlap between, say, eating disorders and workout culture, because it's all about, the one thing we can sort of maybe control is, in part at least, our body. And you go to the you go to the gym regularly, you see number go up. It feels good to have that control, and that will always be there, because if you only go there to just, if it's only for the looks that you're going there, then of course, you're not actually finding meaning there anyway. You're just doing the, for you, most efficient way of achieving a goal. And I don't know. And this guy is called a philosopher. But Nick Bostrom in general, massive piece of shit, and so forth. I need to be careful, but also eugenics fan, and a piece of, well, a bit of a racist, turns out. Um, There's like emails from Nick Bostrom from the 90s where he talks about the fact that I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically says blacks are less intelligent than whites. I like this sentence. That's what Nick Bostrom writes. And he does use the N-word a bunch in that, and then he later apologized for using the N-word, but he never really retracted the actual statement there. And it was, well, I guess that's that. And then in his book Superintelligence, about artificial intelligence taking over the world and everything and turning us all into paper clips and all that bullshit, right? He talks about how humans could achieve superintelligence by selective breeding to increase IQ, which, is something that humans have tried to do in the past. And we call that eugenics. And that's the book that, Elon Musk and Bill fucking Gates and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel and so forth have read and claim is the most important book on artificial intelligence. So if you're wondering why I want to finish this AI video, it is because I once again found fascists. It's surprisingly easy. Well, thanks for being there, Chadia, and maybe see you later. Not too far away from the end of the Odyssey. Have you reached Ithaca? While darkness gathers. But have you ever read Gather Darkness? Highly recommend that one. Gather Darkness by Fritz Lieber, a book about how Satanists are the good guys, sort of. It's a really weird sort of far future sci-fi novel where the church is in total control and you have rebels against the I guess more or less Catholic Church, uh, who always go "Hail Satanas," and it's an interesting thing for a U.S. sci-fi book written in the 1960s or 50s. Going "Hail Satan!" Yes, these are the good guys. If the dog has already passed, that is sad. That's like really sad, the whole dog thing. But uh, the wonderful Lord Weird Slowfag made a couple of songs on that topic, including one on Maya's the Swineherd. But yeah, and yes, you're right there. Orwell was pretty insightful. I don't know if you've like Jacob Geller, the video essay guy, made a video on why does everyone think 1984 agrees with them, and I found it a very insightful video on sort of like the basics of who Orwell was as an introduction and yeah, why everyone thinks from the far right to the far left thinks that 1984 agrees with their politics, and it's definitely all just about the other guys. But apparently, there's drama about the new Christopher Nolan Odyssey thing because the right wing grifter edge lords are complaining about weird shit. But the outrage spice must flow, as they say. Have I asked you this, Britton? Have you ever read the Anabasis by Xenophon? Because it's one of those classics, so to speak, like classical Greek literature. Things where people always go, well, you got to read Thucydides and you got to read Homer, and we ignore all the rest. And people are missing out because the sometimes just called the March of the 10,000 or some other form of that because you know Anabasis is a bit of a difficult word, and I wonder how many people understood why Rebecca Kwong was titling her last book Catabasis, but yes, it's about Helen. It's also about possibly a Elliot Page playing the ghost of Achilles because all of those idiots think that Achilles has to be a very manly man, which is, you know, not even in the text where Achilles was disguised as a girl for the longest fucking time. So having a trans man play Achilles would actually make the whole thing more authentic, but we can't have that. So I guess everyone is everyone being dumb for the most insincere reasons, which are, of course, making money and keeping Elon Musk entertained, I guess. Anyway, so the Anabasis by Xenophon is really cool. So the basic plot is, and because Xenophon is part of that, right? Xenophon was a general during the Peloponnesian War and after that, and Cyrus, the younger Cyrus at the time of the Persian Empire, that dynasty, wants to overthrow his brother, uncle, whatever, and hires 10,000 Greek mercenaries to, go and do war shit in Persia and get him the job. And Xenophon is one of the people, one of the generals going there doing that stuff. And they fight a big battle, and Cyrus the Younger, gets killed during the battle. And now you have, 10,000 Greek mercenaries without an employer stuck in somewhere in the Persian Empire, just trying to get home. And then the story, the most of that is just like his sort of like recounting of their way through the Caucasus all the way to the Black Sea and back home to mostly Athens and that area. And it's surprisingly modern in a lot of ways. It reads surprisingly modern. Like you have memoirs from World War II, especially from the Eastern Front, read a lot like what Xenophon did there, and it's just a really good book. I highly recommend it. But I also think that Herodotus is a superior historian to Thucydides, and that is, also he's got cooler stuff happening. I have read Babel. I didn't like it that much. There were some interesting things going on. I don't think her style, her authorial voice is something that works well for me. I still want to try Yellowface because it's contemporary literary fiction or something of the sorts, and not historical fantasy. But the point that she makes in Babel is one that I already know, and her tendency to over-explain things at some point felt condescending to me. But the thing is, like, one of the history professors doing modern history, not contemporary history, at my university is an expert in 19th century British Empire. So I don't need to learn about how the Opium Wars were maybe kind of bad and stuff like that. I already know that shit. But then I guess I'm also in that regard, in like internationally speaking, in a minority. And when that book came out, people were arguing that it would look it made imperialism look bad, and Britain did bring railroads to India, and all of these wonderful things that colonialism did are now sort of like bad mouthed by R.F. Kuang. And if people in the year of our Lord 2023 are still defending colonialism with the "but we brought railroads" argument, maybe you need to be this direct and blunt and over explain because you know education and shit. um I did, however, feel that when it comes to colonialism, colonialism in British colonialism in India, in this case particular, 10 Incarnations of Rebellion by Vaishnavi Patel is the far superior book, at least for me, because it does do similar things. It just makes them work better. And instead of a bunch of rich, sort of like special boys and girls at Oxford University, you have a bunch of local women organizing resistance against the British in India. And it also quotes and mentions Franz Fanon, which always good, and Eli Wiesel and people like that. So it's definitely the more interesting book and definitely fun in a way. Thanks, Ronald. Thanks for that. It's one of the things that why karate has never worked for me as a sport. Hmm. So yeah, Britain. I would recommend you read Ten Incarnations of Rebellion. It's the better book. But if you already own Babel, then it's a fine book. I also found like some of the choices she made weird, where there is this thing with the main character and the other one of the other guys, where they have like one picnic where stuff slightly becomes somewhat homoerotic and so forth. And it's very clear that the main one of the main characters is gay, right? Um, and she doesn't she never fully commits, and I was like, that scene, like the tenderness of friendship of like two university students maybe turning into something more, just never gets picked up again and just like ends up being going nowhere. And I'm like, well, I wish you would have done more of that, like make it more romanticy is what I'm saying, because that's good. It is not in Marco Polo. There's a lot of interesting stuff in Marco Polo, but the 1 foot so large that it gives shade is, I'm pretty sure, not in Marco Polo. It might be in one of the others. What's his face? Uh, can't remember right now. But Clark Ashton Smith wrote a story about him. Uh, British author, wrote like another, yeah, also like one of those travelogues, the same way that Marco Polo's journey is a travelogue, with the difference that he never actually left Britain, so it's all made up. Whereas with Marco Polo, at least some of the stuff is based in reality. So I have in fact read the travels of Marco Polo for a course at university. Like one semester, we went through the travels of Marco Polo, one, you know, from the beginning to the end, one, a couple of chapters per week. So yeah, Marco Polo. Yeah, I've not read. I've only read Babel, and I have. I said I want to try Yellowface because it's something different, and maybe her sort of like snarky Tumblr-ish voice works better in something that is all about social media and so forth. In a way that it didn't work for me with Babel. Yeah, that is true, right? Because I mean, you're talking about yeah, that picnic with Rami and Robin, and I wish she would have done more with that, because that scene is really really well written in a way that a lot of the rest of the book is not, and I just want her to be more emotional. But then maybe I'll just read fucking Taipei's story, which is the weird new the new novel that everyone seems to be upset about because a character from Israel is mentioned, and I'm here and it's like, well, if a book set in a military dictatorship is bad because it also mentions one character from Israel, I think we might lack some context here. We might also lack some education about the history of Taiwan, which darker than most people are aware of, but because of the whole like we hate the People's Republic of China, it's important to sort of like assume that Taiwan has always been the good guys, and clearly because the other guys were supposedly communists, that must mean the other guy that Taiwan has to be, the freedom-loving democratic country, which it wasn't. Apparently, first general elections in Taiwan were in the 1990s, and I think martial law was only abolished in 1986 or something like that. So interesting stuff to learn about Taiwan that most people don't know. So instead, we focus on the Israeli, pianist. I mean, see, the thing is, like with Babel, there are some really interesting elements in there, and the idea of using language as a, you know, the language sort of like magic based on language and knowing sort of like looking at translation, how translation is never perfect, and how that sort of like dissonance in translation is used as a tool for magic, basically as the basis of magic, and how that means that that you extract language from places the way we go to say the Amazon and take all the really cool plant based medicine from indigenous people there and then patent that shit and sell the hell out of it and so forth. How that is an extractive kind of thing to map that over on language and how language gets changed by colonialism. All of that stuff is really interesting. She just then doesn't do much interesting stuff with it. You know what I mean? And that's the frustrating part to me. And that's why I said that if you want to read a book about colonialism and resistance and stuff like that, then 10 Incarnations of Rebellion is the better book. And generally, I'm just like very, very much, after two books, I'm very much a fan of Vaishnavi Patel's approach to doing fantasy stuff and doing very political, very openly political fantasy and urban fantasy and stuff like that. And mixing that with Hindu mythology or Indian history and stuff like that. She's just really, really fucking good at this stuff. And yeah, read 10 Incarnations of Rebellion and then read We Dance Upon Demons because, a book about demons and reproductive healthcare and reproductive care and how, the humans are still the monsters in that novel. I mean, to be fair, Britain, I think there's lots of stuff going on there. Partly it's, social media hype and so forth. Partly it's people feeling really helpless. And, the fact that there's like a genocide going on and no one's doing anything about it. And if you, that makes people feel helpless. And having something like this sort of like is a way of feeling like you do something, like you are in fact doing something when you're not actually doing something, because once again, most of us don't have much of a chance to change global politics at the moment. And I think that's part of it. Another part, I would argue, is that because of RF Kuang's sort of like writing style in particular, right, because she does over explain and so forth a lot, um, people are not necessarily good at sort of like discerning or expecting nuance from her, because there is a lot of interesting stuff going on with a country like Israel, having had a long history of connections and collaborations with apartheid states like South Africa and Rhodesia when it was still Rhodesia, and military dictatorships like fucking Idi Amin's Uganda and stuff like that. There is a long history of that. So having a someone from Israel in a collaboration, cultural exchange in this case, with the at this time still military dictatorship in Taiwan makes historical sense, and it is certainly not going to defend anything going on right now. So I think the fact that Kwang does usually over explain makes it difficult for her readers to sort of notice, understand that context if it's not fully explained, because it's simply not because they're not smart enough to do that, but because you know we adapt to like an author's voice in a lot of senses, right? In a lot of ways, we adapt to that. We expect certain things from them. It's like You read H.P. Lovecraft, you're not prepared for subtle irony, right? That's not going to happen in Lovecraft. So if Lovecraft pulls that, you're kind of surprised, and maybe it's harder to do that. And with Kwang, I think it's a similar thing where people are not expecting that sort of like anything like that without like a proper over explanation in a lot of ways. And the fundamental thing with R.F. Kwang is of course that she's young and incredibly successful and a woman of color, well, Chinese. So it's very easy to hate her because people don't like it when young women are successful. So it all has to be her being coming from like a very privileged family and all that kind of stuff. So there is a constant need for some people to attack RF Kuang never no matter what. So if someone naively sort of points out something they don't like about her new book, it's very easy to sort of like in a bad faith way to jump on that and pile on that and pretend to be morally outraged, even though the main thing you want is just take down, attack a successful young woman. That's also something that we need to keep in mind when it comes to RF Kuang. It's like, and I don't even like her stuff, right? That is true with the ticks. It's really bad for you. You can get really terrible uh, terrible illnesses from that. I'm not, not recommending ticks. Yes, Vaishnavi Patel, 10 incarnations, not incantations. It's really good. It did like 10 chapters, obviously, and every chapter ends with a retelling of one aspect of Hindu mythology that then that applies to the thing that has just happened in the history setting. So it's really well done. Um, no, you're right there, Betty. There is that, like the bandwagoning part is definitely there. Um, the cheap gotchas, I think. So here's the thing. Once again, in a lot of ways, I feel that also once again comes down to sort of like the helplessness, the powerlessness that a lot of people feel, where cheap gotchas is the only thing you can get, right? Because I can't change US politics. Me voting every 4 years doesn't even change German politics that much. And in between, I'm kind of stuck. So if I get, the chance to call the Conservative Party dickheads, I will do that. Is it going to be productive? Not really. But on the other hand, yeah, what am I going to do? Start a revolution? Maybe? I don't know. See, I didn't know about Philip Chase doing this, which is obviously unfortunate, but it's hard to know these things in advance because unlike, unless YouTube actually, live streams don't necessarily show up in advance or not as much in like YouTube recommendations or anything of the sort. So unless I actively go through all the bookish YouTube channels and check if they have upcoming live streams, I just don't know about that stuff, right? But here's the thing, right? That I find fascinating there, Brittany, is that the weird sort of like assuming that communism and capitalism are sort of like the only two systems, and if you criticize one, you're automatically in favor of the other. When that's not how these things work. Capitalism is well, it's also an ideology, but it's very much a way of doing. It's a theory, right? Like the whole Marx thing is like you read Capital by Marx, and it's just an analysis of like how it can, political economics work. That's all it is. It doesn't say we should stop this right now. It goes, well, here's the problems that will crop up if you do capitalism real hard. It's not prescriptive in that regard. It is just descriptive, and in a lot of ways, I think that makes that kind of discourse difficult. I have to say, however, that yeah, please criticize, say, Stalinist, Soviet Stalinism or whatever, and those forms of communism. Please do so. They are very much, worthy of critique. But capitalism still does really suck. Or to put it mildly, the form of capitalism that we have settled on in at least the global north and so forth does bring with it some contradictions that will lead to more and more stress. And right now, people seem to be unwilling to do something about that. And it's not like you have to abolish capitalism to solve problems like climate change. There there could be ways of doing both to keep capitalism going and still not completely burn the planet and do all of these things. There are ways of mitigating the harms that every single political system will automatically inevitably do. There are ways of mitigating that, but right now people seem to be unwilling to even consider those kind of things, and instead press harder on the make things shitty button, and that's also difficult. But I did say that recently. It's like it's in the beginning of in the foreword of Frederick Jameson's postmodernism or the cultural logic of late capitalism, where he mentions, and this is kind of true, that very few people use the word capitalism, or like what he says is that people that use the word capitalism are either Marxists, or are seen as Marxists, or are fringe libertarians. Everyone else just assumes that using the word capitalism, which is once again just the description of like how an economic system works, but using that term already paints you in a specific corner, and how that has sort of like twisted or made it hard to actually have conversations about, say, economic systems, because you're already sort of like assumed to be in one specific political corner. I have not yet read Last King of Ostenard. I have all of them. I wanted to read all of them, and then he postponed the fourth book or by a year, so I didn't start it. I have read the obviously the first one. I have read the Dragonbone Chair Memories of a Thorn, and I've read the short for Ted Williams, very short novel or almost novella for Ted Williams, which is The Heart of What Was Lost. And that one I really, really enjoyed. So I am going to read Last King of Ostenard. I, just need to settle down for it. But I feel like Ted Williams, or at least his Ostenard stuff, these are autumn books for me. It's like Lord of the Rings is an autumn book. It's like October is the perfect time to read this type of very slow moving epic fantasy. It's not like a summer book for me. So I might go to Last King of Ostenard in, say, October or November. Yes, Britain, of course, I will read the new Alan Moore book. I think it came out this week. So yeah, something I'll get next week, I guess. See, the thing is, with Brothers of the Wind, if you assume it's a Disney movie, it will be one that is really, really patronizing towards Native Americans. It sounds like that kind of thing, right? Yes, Bedivere. I agree. They're tools, and you can take stuff from one or the other, and so forth. I mean, if you read fucking what's his face, Joseph Schumpeter, right, the Austrian guy that talks all about like disruption and stuff, as much of a fan of capitalism as you might find, right? And he still thought that in the long run, capitalism will fail. Like, this is not just like a leftist position. This is one that, you know, used to be, something that a lot of economists were aware of. And then fucking Hayek and his bunch came and took over. And yeah. See, the thing is, if I had a time machine, or I would go back in time and I would make sure that instead of doing nuclear tests somewhere where we irradiate indigenous populations, we'll just do we'll do one nuclear test and we'll do it at Chicago University in, say, I don't know, 1967 or something, and get Robert Bork, get Milton Friedman, get all of those fuckers, make the world a slightly less bad place. Yeah, that's like the whole weekend thing. So fascinating in Germany has, and I was having a conversation with a friend from Italy, which is supposedly a very Catholic country, and they were like, "So, why do you have a public holiday right now?" And I was, well, because here the church, and in particular the Catholic Church, allied with labor unions, and this is why we have public holidays for lots of like Christian holidays where everything is closed down and people don't have to work on, say, Christ Ascension or the Monday after Pentecost or Corpus Christi next week, or fucking Epiphany in January if you're lucky or living in the right state. But this weird sort of alliance between labor unions and churches is one of those fascinating things that often gets sort of like ignored. But yeah. Yes, I agree, Bedivere. Like, I feel like in general, lots of like infrastructure stuff should be nationalized and run in that way, because the same way that like running like a system as a for-profit, public transport should not be a for-profit enterprise, because it's infrastructure. The goal is to make it work. The goal is not to make it money, because those two things do not necessarily go together. And the way that the US has like sort of like completely fucked up its train system. I recently talked with Mike about this, that I'm constantly fascinated by how broken trains in the US are, when one of the key images of like America, the United States, sort of like, obviously, admittedly, through media and so forth, from like Western movies and novels, is trains. This country used to be famous for trains, and now, now you're not. And it's easy to blame Eisenhower and the highway stuff, but it's a deeper thing. And having a sort of like publicly owned infrastructure, and assuming that infrastructure is there for everyone to make that stuff work, would really help. And definitely with the power system, I mean, the fact that like there are fucking blackouts and brownouts in US, in the US, and if it snows in Texas once, the entire state is suddenly out of power. It's like, that is ridiculous for like any developed nation. That should happen, right? And it does constantly. Yes, the second one, I think it's called I Hear a New World or something. I think it came out on Tuesday or Thursday. I might be confusing that because, time and stuff, but in my head it said like I think 26th of May or something like that. Well, Murray Rothbard was just also like a racist piece of shit, among other things. I mean, we've spoken about this, and I think Hayek is interesting in that everyone assumes Hayek is like an economist when Hayek was all kinds of other stuff. Like Hayek wrote on connectivist models of the brain, the basis of artificial intelligence today. In fact, what's his name? Frank Rosenblatt, the guy who created the first artificial neural network that worked, the perceptron. He cites Hayek as an inspiration. So Hayek is a lot of stuff that is weird, in that it doesn't fit into the doing economy shit thing. I feel both Hayek and Mises are wrong in a lot of ways. Um, but stuff got way worse afterwards. Milton Friedman is the one that needs to be shot. I mean, obviously not now because he's dead, but Friedman and Murray Rothbard definitely, and there's a lot of these. I mean, all the libertarian motherfuckers right now, like Hans Hermann Hoppe and those people. Wilhelm Röpke used to be like a big sort of like uh, Hayek style neoliberal guy. I think he used to teach in Marburg for a while, where I live. We certainly the street that the philosophical institute philosophy institute is located at is named after him. uh, Big Hayek fan, part of the Malcontent society, all of those things. Also assumed, wrote in defense of apartheid South Africa because he assumed that for genetic reasons it was important that white people did in fact rule the country and make sure that everything worked because you know, black South Africans, according to fucking Wilhelm Röpke, are genetically inferior. So that problem has always been there on the fringes of sort of neoliberal thought. There has always been that connection to, once again, eugenics and racism and stuff. And Rothbard certainly incorporated a lot of that stuff and was part of the group of sort of like neoliberal Hayek people that sought an alliance with the far right, with the racist far right in the US in particular. Other Murray is obviously also one of them, right? The Charles Murray, the bell curve guy, he used to be, I think he's still part of the Mont Pelerin Society and big Hayek fan, and writing books about how apparently skin color influences your IQ and stuff like that. So I don't know, lots of unsavory motherfuckers. Thornall, I see where you're going with this. If you want to if you want to revive the Iron Guard, that's up to you. I will not interfere with that kind of stuff. No, I don't think I have anyone from any Japanese friends. Um, in reality, I do have several Italian friends though. Um, I've also never been really interested in Japanese culture, which I know makes me weird these days, but somehow I've tried to avoid that specific rabbit hole because I know that if I would get interested in it, it would cost even more time and energy and all these other things that I don't have, and you want to avoid that. Yes, I have been in the sun. I was at a festival last weekend, and I was at a festival this weekend, and Germany has been very sunny of late. Temperatures were somewhere in the 30s, which is, 86 to 87, 88 freedom units temperature. And if you stand in front of a stage for like 12 hours every day, turns out you don't fall to dust, but it does in fact make you slightly less pale. Yes, gotcha politics are still very much cancerous. I agree with you there. I just believe that a lot of it comes from that feeling of powerlessness, of having less and less sort of like influence on how stuff, you know, how stuff turns out and what stuff happens and so forth, right? Like, because then, then cheap gotcha politics is the only thing you got because clearly you can't actually change things. And I hope this is changing. I feel stuff, things like the way that people like Zoran Mamdani, for example, in New York, are doing politics. I think do work well in that regard. Like the whole like sewer socialism thing, I think is a way forward because it does give at least some people the feeling that they, do in fact have agency and being on the side of someone who wants to change stuff and actually, not just work, fill their own pockets with money, which is, what the other side currently has, I guess. I mean, we should all be philosophers. I think that's a good start because that would make us all kings, according to straight up eugenicist Plato. No, in all seriousness, I think, yes, more interesting discourse would definitely help. Mike, I'm not a big expert on Hermann Hesse. I personally feel that, what's it called? I mean, obviously, the go-to one would be Steppenwolf. Um, there is Siddhartha, which apparently is very popular in outside of Germany. There is is it called the glass bead game? Is it called that in English? In German, it's das Glasperlenspiel. If you want to read a weird one, his relatively early one, Demian, is very angsty, gothy kind of stuff. But I guess I'll go with Steppenwolf at the end of the day. Yeah, I can see that, Bedivere. I this is like so like the big sort of interest in anime and manga and stuff only hit after I was already sort of like socialized into into nerd stuff. But then again, I'm as a dude, I got lots of like nerd stuff for dudes all the time, so that was easy for me. Um, and like Japanese media has really gotten big in Germany only in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. I mean, obviously it has always been there, but it really blew up in the last decade or so. So lots of like people I know that are younger than me are heavily into Japanese stuff, Japanese media, both anime and manga and games, of course, and novels and stuff. And I tried. I've read two books by Japanese authors. One of them was really bad. That's Murakami's 1Q84. I really didn't like that one. And then I read the Memory Police by I don't know remember the name right now. That one I did like. That was really good. The Memory Police. I can recommend that one. It's weird and depressing, and weird and depressing kind of is my vibe. Hey, Kat, how you doing? Sounds fun. Where the town drunks congregate and sing all night. That's where I've been the last couple of days. I can tell you that. See, for me, no, for me it was Lord of the Rings to Conan to everything, I guess. I tried to remember when I first read Discworld, and then then everything got changed. Although it all started with Winnie the Pooh, which is as I said, the best novel ever written. See, the thing with Hesse is that that's the English name of the state that I live in, which is in German. It's Hessen with an N at the end, and it's the area around Frankfurt and so forth, where this other German author lived. That one guy that wrote that one book about guys making deals with demons and stuff like that. Fun thing, Goethe, that being the guy from Frankfurt, his first novel, called The Suffering of Young Werther. Terrible book, really depressing book. If you want to be depressed and moody as a teenager, why not read a book about a guy who falls in love and then kills himself? But what's interesting is because it was written, late 1800s, when the whole Ossian craze with the fake Ossian poetry kind of thing became really big. So Goethe does have like several sections where he either quotes or makes up his own Ossian poetry, because that's sort of like that was the in thing to do at the time. Britain, I suspect that if you get right down to it, everyone is strange people. That's just the way things are. Obviously, living on an island doesn't make things better, because it does make cultural interactions a bit less sort of like common, where when you go here in at least in Europe, right, like cultural exchange is just baked in, because if you live in fucking Aachen or Cologne or whatever, then of course you'll buy stuff in the Netherlands and you cross over to Belgium and you'll do all of these things. And if you are in the south of Germany, then you have constant interactions with France and so forth, right? Like sort of like this cultural interchange exchange is much easier than being on an island. I mean, just ask the fucking British. Well, I mean, I like both Winnie the Pooh and Gardens of the Moon. I haven't really tried to come up with parallels between the two, but I'm sure I can find some at some point. Although Winnie the Pooh doesn't have a flying moon fortress for his honey. Well, I mean, you have a point there, Thornell. But then again, blaming the fall of Constantinople is once again a thing that lots of people do for good reasons. But to bring all of this together, have you, Thornall, in particular, read Baudolino by Umberto Eco? Because it does both have, the sacking of Constantinople. In this case, the sacking of, I think it was already Constantinople at the time, yes, during the Fourth Crusade. And it has the people with one foot so large that they can rest in the shade underneath that foot, both in one novel. It also has Frederick Barbarossa drowning in a river and other stuff. It's a really good book. Piglet, yeah, makes sense. Um, if you have not read this, Demidrack, there is an amazing thing that Lavi Tidar did on Twitter, like a Twitter thread, telling a story, in this case, a noir hard-boiled story, well, Winnie the Pooh as a hard-boiled noir kind of story. Are you Pooh the detective? She said. I live under the name of Saunders. It's really good, and Piglet is definitely doing Kalam-like stuff in that very specific Winnie the Pooh story. Um, I think you should read some Umberto Eco. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy his stuff. I feel like Name of the Rose and Baudolino are probably more accessible than, say, Foucault's Pendulum, which is very much not accessible, but really cool and fun and has all the weird shit. But yeah, I think you would enjoy Umberto Eco. Yeah, I figured you might have read that, read Baudolino, Max Garfield. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That too makes a lot of sense, Thornall. I too await the rise of Constantinople. Well, Kat, I think you are being way too critical here. I mean, make make the Byzantine Empire great again sounds like a really good political program. I'm sure nothing bad will ever come out of that. Or at least, bring back the Byzantine Empire's approach to dealing with uh, bad monarchs. I think that one could still be helpful. Hey, Britain, glad you're back. But yeah, so Mike, have you decided when or whether you're going to read what you're going to read next? If you're going to read Dead House Gates first, or go with the alternatives? Beautiful obituary when. Well, I don't know. Last good obituary is has been a while ago, but then I've never been the biggest death metal fan, so there you go. Dead House Gates is a very different beast from Gardens of the Moon in many ways. Also, lots more children dying needlessly. It gets worse from the first pages onwards, Mike. I can promise you that. There are weird, although. Oh right, the first right the prologue is the whole thing with Felicin, isn't it? The whole that part, yeah. Uh, yeah, Dead House Gates gets dark very quickly. Just to be clear, as a content warning, there is a lot of violence. and a lot of violence towards children and sexual abuse and stuff of that sort. It gets very, very adult. Yes, hating on Felicen is definitely wrong. And no, Britain, it's not a cozy read. It's about a rebellion and the kind of violence that happens if a group has been subjugated by a colonizer for a long time and has learned that the only way to do something about that is violence. Because, if all you ever experience as being effective is violence, which is, the way that a lot of colonialism does work at the end of the day, then you realize you might draw to the conclusion that using violence yourself is the only way of actually getting stuff done. Hence, violence and stuff. You can read this book by this French-born, born in the Caribbean, French author. He used to be a psychiatrist before he died of cancer, maybe. Book is called The Wretched of the Earth. It's by Franz Fanon. Highly recommend it. You'll learn a lot about, how being, how Algeria was really fucked up by the French. Uh, Really good book. 7 Cities is a really cool setting. That is true. Jenna Bacchus, yeah. Yeah, Baudolino is weird, but I really like the way it starts. Like Baudolino, the way the opening is like pure fucking Umberto Eco doing Umberto Eco things when you have the really broken narration of Baudolino writing down his stuff with the having scraped clean a parchment, so there's still like some parts of the original text coming through. When you realize that the original text is Otto von Freising's biography of Frederick Barbarossa, and this is just so nerdy cool in a lot of ways. Yes, Echo had a lot of fun with his with that part. That is true. Um, yes, Felicin is one of the two sisters of Ganos Paran. The other one being so like Felicin doesn't even show up in Guardians of the Moon. She's just mentioned when he talks to Tavor, which is the other sister, who also shows up in not Nightingale's Gates, in House of Chains. Is when Tavor becomes a more important character. Yes, Kalar did nothing wrong. Or very little wrong. I mean, with the end of Memories of Ice, you gotta love Calor because he saved us from all of this becoming really, really boring worship of one old dude. So instead, we got something else. And to be fair, the scene in I think it is in Calor in House of Change is really good. The scene with the flashback scene with his horse dying and him crying about his horse dying, that is really good. You mean Kellus? That is the guy from Baker series and Calor. Keller is only like in one scene in Guardians of the Moon. He is a bit more prominent in Memories of Ice, and then later on shows up a couple of times. He's in Guardians of the Moon. Keller is in the camp with Caladan Brood, and there's that one scene with Caladan Brood and Calor and Crone. That's where, yeah. Who else is in that scene in that camp when they ask for support, like some of the Crimson Guard to support or save and protect the coin bearer. That's the scene where Calor shows up in the first novel in Guardians of the Moon, and he's in a couple of other books. He's really big in Blood and Bone. Is it called Blood and Bone? I'm confused right now. The Esselmont novel set on his original continent and everything. Really interesting guy. Destroyed an entire continent for reasons, valid reasons. Yeah, that might be an interesting one, Max Garfield. I'll try to catch that. Well, I mean, Britain, as I said, like one scene in Gardens of the Moon, and he's not an important character in that scene even. He just like walks past and mopes and complains about stuff, which is usually what Kellor does. Not, he does have reasons to complain, but it still can get somewhat, repetitive. And yes, he does bring his own chair. The most important character in Malazan. Important is not the same as, likable or anything of the sorts. I would argue Erastus, the errand, is probably the most important one because everything gets fucked up because of that guy. So yeah, Erastus, possibly piece of shit. I should probably also, go back and reread the Carcanas trilogy, well, the two books by the in the Carcanas, I guess now tetralogy. Well, you coming in with that one, Ori? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Could be. I could agree with that. I don't know. Cotillion always strikes me at so what I find interesting with Cotillion is how once again Cotillion written by Cam Esselmont differs from Cotillion written uh, by Stephen Erickson, especially if you look at like the early Cotillion in the Path to Ascendancy books compared to the Cotillion we all have come to love from the Malazan Book of the Fallen. There's a very interesting sort of like difference there, which made the first Dancer's Lament such a fun book to read because it's like you have this mopey mopey edgelord goth kid constantly getting frustrated by the antics of insane this insane mage kid. That is true about the magic ring. Those are always important in fiction. I've heard about that. In fact, I've actually watched like 20 hours of opera about that. Speaking of, did you guys read that wonderful translation of parts of Beowulf into current West Canadian slang dialect? The Battle of Wolf Boy and Grinder? I have not, Thornall. Yeah, I personally just really enjoyed. I think I really enjoyed the first path to a sentencing novel for its sort of like tighter focus. I guess it's just like a bunch of kids doing dumb kid shit in like this besieged city, and then getting kicked out at the end of the day, and not actually winning, but just surviving and doing dumb stuff. I did really enjoy that. No, I have not seen that, Thornall. So yeah, I guess I'll read the new Alan Moore book next week. That sounds like a plan. And possibly The Luddite and the Mechanic by Jathan Sadowski, which I still wanted to read for the AI video. That is definitely coming, trust me. Ooh, that is something, right? We get mule magic in Dead House Gates already. So yeah, more mules. Theo for the gecko. I assume that is after his famous namesake Theodore Kaczynski, right? Well, I hope not. It is coming. There are people who have maybe even watched uh, current parts of this work in progress. It does exist in parts. I assume Winds of Winter will come first. I'm being realistic here. But yeah, the AI video will come, and you know, I figured that the Jason Sadowski video book might help with that because having a couple more somewhat theoretical books about artificial intelligence can't hurt now, can it? Um, in general, though, I would slowly wind things down. I mean, we've gone for like 2 hours 45 so far, and I'm fine with ending this one ending around 3 hours because, as I said, didn't sleep that much. What with the whole heavy metal thing and stuff like that. So maybe uh, I should at some point get get some rest. Yeah, that's kind of the thing, Bedivere, right? Is this fear that the bubble might burst, and this could still happen. This, I mean, I'm fairly confident that it isn't going to take much longer for the bubble to burst at this point. I think I listened to to Ed Zitron's last monologue a couple of like before starting the stream, and the whole thing with Uber going like, well, maybe AI isn't actually worth the money that we're spending on it. That sounds like one of those key sort of like stuff. Things are beginning to really get shaky if the CEO of Uber says like, we're spending way too much money to use AI tools that don't actually produce anything. And if someone of that caliber says that kind of stuff, then things might not look that rosy. The dangers of Wintermute. But Wintermute is the good guy at the end of the day, isn't he? Isn't it? Let's put it that way. That's like one of those fascinating things when it comes to AI stuff with sci-fi, right? Is that uh, the artificial intelligences are kind of the good guys in the Sprawl trilogy, which maybe people should read more than just one sci-fi book about artificial intelligence, because I feel like some of them have stuff to say, but then you watch a movie like fucking Blade Runner, which is all about artificial humans, uh, well, replicants being enslaved or murdered by who's basically slave slave chaser at the end of the day. And people read that and go like, well, clearly what we need is exactly that. We have AI that does all the jobs for us and is also going to be sentient and will still own it, which my thoughts on Rothfuss are that I have read The Name of the Wind, but I've never read The Wise Man's Fear because my plan at the time was to wait for The Doors of Stone to come out to read all three in one go. And that is still my plan. I did enjoy parts of uh, Name of the Wind. I think Rothfuss does have a way with words. Like when he wants to write poetic stuff, he's really good at that. I did not necessarily care too much for the whole like magic school setting, but I'm not a big fan of magic school settings to begin with. And horny 20-year-olds or 16-year-olds or whatever do not necessarily make for the kind of entertainment that I personally enjoy at this point. Like I don't need to read books about people being as stupid and ridiculous as I was at that age. It does not necessarily make me a very happy person. Well, I mean, you can give your 10-year-old daughter the unabridged audiobook of the works of Theodore Kaczynski, which is a thing that exists. You don't want to look too deeply into that, but yeah, Teen Wolf, yeah, that makes sense. I don't have an older boy called Deucalion. Yeah, the anthropic mathematics thing is still fascinating. But yeah, grifter is gonna grift, and I feel like the one of the big problems is that like right now, so much so much venture capital money and thus like general money is tied up in these two or three fucking AI startup stuff, and at some point one of them has to go public to get to sort of like free up that money, to free up those investments, and so people can put them into something else. It is in a very clear sense, it is throttling at this point, starting to choke sort of like general economic liquidity in a lot of ways. And at the same time, because you have these two big startups, and obviously you still have xai and so forth, um it has sort of like shifted all of like the really good AI research people have all moved to these private companies instead of working for universities. And since those private companies have all just sort of like gambled on large language models being the way forward, a lot of like research that could be really helpful and interesting is not happening because everyone is doing this one thing, which is make it bigger in the hopes that something comes of that. And I feel that is a real danger. I would argue that when it comes to AI, if anyone can make AI, this specific aspect of artificial intelligence, work for them economically, it will be Google with the DeepMind people, because they are Google has enough products where it can already uses lots of large language models and artificial neural networks. Something I mentioned in that video that I did on the whole like last week, I think. Or was it in the books for men book video? I'm kind of confused about. I recently brought that up. I was like, the way that YouTube recommendation works through artificial neural networks. In fact, like two of them. One of them boiling down like all the possible videos that are on YouTube and setting up a list of 100 or so videos that according to your user data as an intro, like your user data as an input, basically would be possible outputs, and then you have a second artificial neural network that does the ranking stuff and puts them in like an ranked list, and that's how YouTube recommendations happen. So Google uses artificial intelligence, obviously lots of machine learning already, and DeepMind is less focused on just doing large language models and scaling them up as much as possible. So there is more interesting stuff going on there. But if Google and DeepMind can't hack it, then no one can right now. And did your friend enjoy Kaczynski's manifesto? So yeah, there is interesting stuff happening there is movement in the AI thing, and I mean, obviously, with what were the SpaceX uh, IPO on the numbers for that one, which forced at least Elon Musk to sort of like at least show part of the economics behind Grok and stuff like that. Um, People are starting to wonder what's going on with this whole thing, because gambling that that you accidentally will create God and then enslave it. You know, it's one of those weird propositions where it's like, at what point did people stop just to step back from time to time and go like, is this actually a good thing that we're doing there? I mean, there's a lot of stuff with Kaczynski that just, is interesting in a lot of ways, where you can see how Kaczynski could have gone like a very different direction. That being said, he was fundamentally murdered, institutionally murdered by the state by putting him into solitary confinement for so fucking long. Where I'm like, well, compared to lots of other people that are in prison, which is still wrong, his crimes were moderately harmless, right? Like he didn't kill a lot of people, so what gives, right? And I think that's one of those fascinating moments where you realize that like state violence is still very much sort of like directed in specific ways, and a lot of that is sort of like self-defense, which means that if you are disagreeing with the state working like it does at the moment, yeah, shit can get harsh really quickly. Um, well, the thing is that American academia is being rapidly disassembled by 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 the current administration. So what they'll mostly do is move to other countries where funding is less of an issue, because you don't get your research defunded because of one word that you use, and that suddenly has to uh, be taken away because we can't have like DEI. Whereas, like, you use the word inclusion, clearly we can't actually fund you. And it's like, well, but we're doing market research and this makes sense. No chance. So, yeah. See, he should have. There is I think it might be apocryphal, the story that Kaczynski did, in fact, consider transitioning, was maybe trans, and like did in fact have an appointment with a psychologist to talk about all of that, and then something happened, and that consultation got cancelled, and then we all know where he did go after that. But fascinating stuff. But yeah, he definitely was a very bright mind. But you know, this is not necessarily a world where being a bright mind does help, unfortunately. But yeah, I no, as I said, like as I brought up the Kaczynski thing, I was looking for something very different, searching for a different book, and the Unabomber Manifesto and the complete writings of Theodore Kaczynski were recommended by, um, in this case, ever everyone's search algorithm. So there you go. I don't know what to make with that, make of that, but apparently, at least one audiobook platform thinks that I really should read Ted Kaczynski. I don't know. The future is bright. Yes. Is it orange? Well, you know. Once the sun turns into a red dwarf, I guess it will be orange. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't follow the SPSFC, but wait, you're a judge this time round, Ida, right? Or were you last year? I think I remember something there. I don't think it will help me with the AI video, but the I was searching for another book, for a specific other book about the current AI topic when Kaczynski manifesto came up. So the connection is there. Man with gun. I've never heard of that one. But yeah, Man with Gun. So that's the one that you personally think is a good book. Um, well, I wouldn't know, Tom, but I assume the idea is that you know, if you pay everyone enough money, then someone will make the someone always wants to do every job. There is someone who genuinely enjoys doing most jobs, and you just make sure that people can do the jobs they want to do, and so forth. Otherwise, fully automated luxury space communism, I guess. But I'm yeah, Thornall, you're true. You're right there. It will be Marxists who do those jobs. Look, I don't want to do jobs in general. I mean, stop. I think what I find interesting in this regard, and as I said, I slowly want to end this, but yeah, what I find interesting is the definition of job is one of those fascinating things where we I recently spoke about that when we were talking about hobbies and stuff like that as well. Is like that we assume that job is what you do to get money, and because you need to get money because otherwise you wouldn't do that, which is a very, very, historically speaking, a relatively recent concept, right? A lot of stuff that we assume to be hobbies these days because we're not paid for them, used to be just like part of like the everyday thing people do, right? Like if you stuff like home, like emotional labor, household labor, all of these things that have sort of like been pushed into the unpaid labor for mostly women in that regard, right? Like that stuff has been like that used to be just part of the same sort of like area as all kinds of other things you had to do to survive. And this radical split between this is job sucks, but you get paid for it because you need money to do stuff, and everything else is that split I think is fairly recent, and I find it interesting in that we only that so much of this discourse is then turned on like, so who's going to do the jobs and which jobs will remain and all of that kind of stuff, when it's like, well, the splitting job and non-job spheres is already part of the weird sort of like understanding, because lots of stuff that people do that are a lot of things that are valid and really important for society are not considered jobs because we have sort of like arbitrarily decided that they are not. Well, that is also true, Ida. I'm glad that things return to Star Trek at the end, after all. But guys, and I mean this in the most gender neutral way possible, folks. I am getting very very tired and frazzled, and I can feel my my focus drift even more than usual. So I'm going to slowly end this. I'm glad some of you showed up. I hope you had fun, and we'll do this again next month, I assume. And I just remembered I have to read the Reformatory because we'll have our offline book club meeting on Thursday. So I guess I know what to read next week. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Well, glad you're back, Kale, and I hope your Monday will not suck too much, which is, I guess, all we can hope for in Mondays. So, yeah, guys, thanks for hanging out. I do very much appreciate that, and normal how can I say this? Regular content will happen tomorrow and after that. So that's what we'll do. And yeah, thanks, and